Now that I think about it, I'm like, I should use TikTok to get young people into our profession.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, how do I head them off? How do I head off the big four and their dumb recruiters?
All right, everybody, it's that time again. TaxProTalk. Jim Buffington, who do we have with us today?
Hey, welcome everybody. Today we have Lorilyn Wilson CPA in Portland, Oregon that we're going to be talking to today about bringing young people into our profession.
Yeah, after reading over the bio and talking about the NPR, it'd be good to get to know you for our viewers. So you had kind of an unconventional path into our industry, which is, I find that more and more. So if you want to tell us a little bit about where you come from, how you got into being a CPA and owning a business.
Yeah, so I'm just, in my heart, I'm a jock. I got a full ride scholarship to school, and I played softball for the University of Michigan, and I just took an easy major, political science. It's all theory. It's just writing your opinion. I'm like, I could talk about my opinions all day long. So this is going to be easy, And also, on a Division I traveling schedule during the spring, you're gone every Thursday, Friday, essentially. So you can't, no one's majoring biochemistry who's an athlete. Let's just say that, Yeah. And so you come out of school, and I actually I'm from Oregon originally, and I attended the University of Michigan. So I moved back from Michigan to Oregon, and this was right during the financial crash. So I graduated in 2007. So, pretty soon the job market got real tight. And you couldn't find much with a Poli Sci degree outside of very entry-level positions, which at the time, I'm like, that's fine, I'll take a job. It was my first job I'd ever had because I was always so busy playing softball. I'd never worked. So I got my first job at 23. And then after a couple of years of answering phones, and opening mail, I was like, okay, this isn't really my thing. This isn't very intellectually stimulating. And so, with that, a lot of Poli Sci people become lawyers. And I'm like, that's 3 years of school, $100,000 of debt. I'm like, I don't think about that. I don't think that's going to work. And then my dad, he's a doctor. And I'm like, I could do the medical profession. And then I was like, I've never taken a prereq for any, I'd be starting from scratch on that. I'm like, that'd be 100 years of school. So I'm like, I don't think that's a viable option either. And then at the time, my sister-in-law, she is a CPA. And I'm like, look up the requirements. I'm like, I'd never taken an accounting course. And I'm like, I'd have to do 2 terms at a community college and then 3 terms on an online post-bac program. I'm like, it's only $15,000. I'm like, doing that. And so without ever taking one accounting course, I'm like, I'm going to be a CPA.
So you just fell in love with it then, or how did that work? Because I had a very different experience with accounting than maybe you and Jim. So,
you know what? I just told myself, I'm like, I can be good at whatever I want to be good at. And one thing actually that appealed to me with the CPA is you're not stuck doing one thing. It's there's so much flexibility. You can be consulting, internal auditor, external auditor, tax. So I was like, okay, this seems like there's a lot I could do with it, even though I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with it. And so that was just kind of the mindset I have. I'm like, I'll just do it. And then once I kind of go on this journey, I'll decide what I really want to do with it. But I'm like, this is just kind of the first step to get that ball rolling.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great testimony. We have a lot of young people. And I think, if you love numbers, if you love details, if you're good at sort of managing projects, it's a great profession because there's always tons of work. There's always jobs available. Mm-hmm. Even in the next recession, there will be tons of jobs available.
Yes, and that was one thing I talked about too, or considered when I was like, this is kind of a recession-proof job to a certain extent. I'm like, the tax system is not going away, And two, it was funny. I was talking with another female CPA about this. I think women make really good accountants because there's women intuition. And when we see something that's wrong, we're like, we're just gonna keep pulling this thread and keep seeing where that leads. And I think kind of that's why maybe a lot of women are drawn to it because it does allow us to kind of scratch that itch. Because I think women are really good at that, are kind of good at following that path and seeing where it leads and not letting things just lie. They're like, no, we're gonna keep digging until we get to the bottom of it.
And we're seeing so many more women entrepreneurs now. That are either doing full-time gigs or, even part-time gigs while they're still, working at home and stuff. So They, I think in many, many cases, are a much better fit to work with women CPAs than the traditional men CPAs. I think oftentimes it's just better chemistry.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, I prefer as well, just because honestly, it sometimes feels like there's just not a lot of women out there. Like mostly male businesses come into us. And so whenever a female comes, I'm like, hi. Like yesterday I was out, there's a client of ours who we're actually partnering with doing brewery stuff, and they're partnering with a distillery. And so the distillery was out on site, and one of the people out there was a woman. And I was just like, another girl. I'm like, I'm always the only girl.
Yeah.
And so it was nice to be able to just like have another woman there in business talks and talking with her, because it's not that common.
Yeah. Do you mentor, or do you have a mentorship program or a president circle type program? Is there anything you're doing in that space?
Not yet. Do I want to? Yes.
You should, please.
Like, yeah. Oh, I guess one thing I really want to get into is so when I went back to school for accounting, I'm like in my community college class, and I'm like the only one over 19, and the professor was actually and it was Accounting 101. He was actually a CPA who owned a local firm. He would just teach one class a week, and like, bless his heart, it was so dry. It was so dry and like excruciating. But I remember sitting in that class, and I'm like, I could make this fun. Like I could totally do that. So one of my goals is to be able to, and like, I don't need the clout. I don't need to be at I don't need to get my master's and be at a university level, but I'm like, if I could get in at a community college and teach kind of those basic accounting classes and get people excited for what the accounting industry actually is, like, and teach them in a way that's fun and makes sense. I'm like, I would love to do that, because I love teaching. So after I was done at Michigan softball, I continued at Michigan playing softball. I continued to do private lessons for pitching for the next 7 years, just because I love connecting with young people and teaching. And so I'm like, oh, I could totally do that with accounting, and I could make it really fun and digestible.
We need it.
Yes. And like I said, get people excited about, because I think our industry is heading in a really interesting direction, and so,
Absolutely.
Kind of clearing away those, misdemeanors of people like, oh, you're just sitting at a computer and typing on a spreadsheet. Like, that's not what accounting is.
Yeah.
Maybe if you are like locked in the closet at a Big Four, it is. But,
Right.
There's so many fun, interesting, especially with how technology now overlays it so much. It's like, now a lot of people I'm seeing, actually accounting firms want accountants who can code as well.
Yeah.
Oh, how about that, right? API knowledge and
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
And I'm
it's
like,
connecting a lot of different tech stacks and understanding the systems to really architect the best set of applications and things, and moving things around to make it automated.
And Gen Z, like they grew up with this. Like, they are the perfect people to start implementing, because they're so flexible and used to learning stuff very quickly. And I'm on the older millennial side, but all this was developed as we grew up, and so it's like we're pretty familiar as well. But like Gen Z, like, that's something else,
Yeah, they're digital natives. That it comes naturally for them.
Absolutely.
And they're so willing to experiment. They're not afraid of failure. They're willing to experiment and try things until they figure it out. And that's an awesome combination. You've rattled off a ton of creative just aspects or attributes, being a CMO, a CTO, piecing together these applications and making it seamless, moving data around, all of that on the periphery of accounting. So tons of great opportunity for these future young people to come into our industry and not, again, get boxed into just doing tax returns or spreadsheets, but actually really expand out the opportunity for our profession and add way more value to power prosperity for their clients.
Yeah, and bring in people who normally would never have thought of, like, accounting.
Yeah. Can you imagine accounting actually being fun? I mean, we love it, but most people think of it as going to the dentist,
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for watching Tax Pro Talk, brought to you by Intuit Pro Connect for tax and accounting professionals.